Hello everyone. Thank you for watching the video. Wishing you all good health and peace. Dieu Han strode toward the sugarcane field, a machete strapped across her back, and a woven basket ready for harvesting. The towering stalks swayed in the breeze, whispering against one another, casting shadows that blocked out the sunlight. She paused, scanning the field, selecting the mature stalks, firm, slightly dry on the outside. Gripping the handle of her machete tightly, she swung with precision. The sharp blade sliced cleanly through the cane, producing a crisp snapping sound. One strike, then another, and the cane fell. Quickly, she stripped the leaves, trimmed both ends, and gathered the stalks into neat bundles. One by one, the rows of sugarcane were cut down. Sweat trickled down her forehead, but she didn't stop. Just then, she felt her child stir in the sling. She paused, walked to a small clearing, laid out a red cloth, and gently placed the baby down. After soothing the little one for a moment, she returned to her work. Sitting down on the ground, she drew her knife and began peeling the tough outer layers of the sugarcane. Strips of fibrous husk fell away, revealing the fresh, juicy white flesh inside. She snapped off a small piece and bit into it. The burst of sweetness spread through her throat, washing away her fatigue. Taking advantage of the short break, she bundled the peeled stalks neatly into her basket, organizing them for transport. Once everything was ready, she checked on her child. The baby was still peacefully asleep. Bending down, she kissed the little forehead, then carefully secured the child in the sling across her chest. Hoisting the heavy bundle of sugarcane onto her back, she felt the weight press down on her shoulders. Her steps were slow and heavy, but she pressed forward, making her way home. Upon arriving, she laid the baby in bed, nursed the child, then hurried to the porch to continue processing the sugarcane. Her hands moved swiftly, chopping each stalk into smaller sections and packing them into plastic bags for the market. When the work was finally done, she let out a deep breath, dusted off her clothes, and adjusted her basket. As the afternoon sun began to dip, Dieu Han secured her child in the sling once more, lifted the heavy load of sugarcane onto her back, and set off for the market. Rather than waiting at a stall, she moved from vendor to vendor, approaching people with a warm smile. "Ma'am, I have fresh sugarcane, harvested this morning. Would you like to take a look? Sister, this sugarcane is really sweet. I'll give you a good price if you want some for your stall." But not everyone was interested. Some waved her away, others glanced briefly before shaking their heads. Still, she remained undeterred, weaving her way through the rows of vendors. At a sugarcane juice stall, the owner took a small piece, chewed on it, and nodded approvingly. "It's sweet." She bought the entire bundle. Dieu Han beamed, grateful for the large sale, and continued seeking out more customers. She moved tirelessly from one stall to the next, and before she knew it, most of her sugarcane was gone. Counting the small bills she had earned, she sighed in relief. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy a few necessities. Gathering her belongings, she secured her child once more, and made her way home under the fading light of the setting sun. Though exhausted, her heart felt light. Tomorrow would bring more struggles, but at least today she had done her best. After a night of rest, Dieu Han began her new day with work in the garden. Stepping out onto the porch, she opened the basket of seeds she had dried the day before. Carefully selecting the largest, firmest loofah seeds, she set them aside. Then she grabbed a bucket, took a small hoe, and headed to the garden to begin tilling the soil. The earth, still damp from the recent rain, was softer but also sticky, making the work more challenging. She put her strength into each stroke of the hoe, forming neat, even rows. Once finished, she gently placed the seeds into the soil, covering them carefully before watering to ensure the earth absorbed the moisture evenly. As she was focused on her task, a sudden burst of barking echoed from the pond's edge. Startled, she quickly turned and ran toward the noise. What she saw made her freeze. A small golden-furred dog was trapped in a tangle of vines and thick mud near the water's edge. It struggled desperately to free itself, but the more it thrashed, the tighter the vines wrapped around its legs. Its eyes were filled with panic as it whimpered and barked for help. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, though the muddy ground made each step slow and difficult. Kneeling beside the dog, she carefully untangled the vines wrapped tightly around its legs. The dog flinched, trying to pull away, but it was stuck. She spoke to it softly, her hands working steadily to free it. Easy now, don't be scared, almost done. After a few minutes of effort, she finally freed the little dog. It trembled, looking up at her with eyes full of gratitude. She placed it gently on the ground, expecting it to run off, but instead it followed her. Back at home, she scooped some leftover rice and mixed it with a bit of dried fish from the kitchen, setting the bowl down in front of the dog. It sniffed the food briefly before devouring it hungrily, as if it hadn't eaten in days. Sitting beside it, Dieu Han smiled. She didn't know where it had come from or if it had an owner, but it seemed in no hurry to leave. It looked like she had just gained a new friend. Dieu Han returned home after a long morning of hard work. She gently placed her baby down on the red mat, letting the little one sleep peacefully in the quiet space of their small hut. Watching her child rest so soundly, she smiled before quickly preparing for her next task. She stepped into the garden, where the pepper vines were ready for harvest. Running her fingers lightly over the clusters of green peppercorns, she carefully picked the ripe ones, gathering them by the handful and placing them into her basket. The sun blazed overhead, beads of sweat forming on her forehead, but she remained persistent. Just then her baby woke up, crying softly. She hurried inside, cradled the child in her arms and soothed them. After nursing, she placed the baby in the cradle and went back to finish her work. Returning to the porch, she poured the freshly picked pepper onto a large tray, sifting through it carefully with both hands, separating the hollow seeds from the good ones. It was meticulous work, but she had done it countless times before. Once finished, she spread the pepper evenly on a large bamboo tray and set it out under the sun to dry. With the garden work done, she turned to the seedbed where she had planted crops a few days earlier. The soil was dry, so she carried a bucket of water and carefully watered each row. As she bent down to tend to the plants, she suddenly noticed a snake slithering along the edge of the garden. Her heart pounded and she held her breath, watching closely. Slowly, she took a few steps back and grabbed a long branch, waving it gently to drive the snake away. Luckily, it slithered off into the bushes, leaving her still catching her breath. After a long day of non-stop labor, she gathered the sun-dried pepper into her basket and set off for the market to sell it. She went straight to the buyer, emptied the pepper onto the scale, and received her well-earned payment. The weight in her heart lightened just a little. On her way home, she stopped in front of a children's clothing store. She stood there for a moment, then decided to step inside. Browsing through the tiny outfits, she smiled softly. It had been so long since she could buy something nice for her child. When she got home, she immediately dressed her baby in the new clothes, then went to the kitchen to prepare fresh porridge. Stirring the pot, she thought about her plans ahead. Life was still full of challenges, but little by little, she was building a better future for the two of them. Tomorrow was a new day. What awaited her next? Stay tuned for the next chapter of Dieu Han's journey.
Cuộc đời là một con đường dài, nơi giấc mơ hòa tan thực tại. Buồng bước chân ta bắt xây dần bức tranh vẽ lên thử thách lớn. Những nỗi đau, niềm vui tạm bợ tạo nên muôn màu sắc cuộc đời. Dù cuộc sống đôi khi thử thách, những đam mê vẫn trực trào cháy. Hãy sống với đam mê cháy bỏng, đừng chờ đợi mà hãy thực hiện những khoảnh khắc quý giá lắm, đừng để thời gian trôi xa. Giữa bộn bề cuộc sống tìm chút bình yên, trong trái tim lặng lẽ nơi còn phiền. Giọt sương mai đọng trên lá xanh, đem lại niềm vui cuộc sống vắng tanh. Ánh sáng mặt trời dọi qua mây, dù mưa giông vẫn đang đong đầy. Trong lòng chứa đầy hy vọng, ngày mai sáng tươi chờ đợi ta. Bước đi trên con đường đầy hoa, dẫu khó khăn không lùi bước. Trong tim giữ trọn niềm tin, cuộc sống này mãi đẹp tươi.